Hi, this is Carol Kurtz, Darlington. I'm an associate trainer for Art2Ride, and today I'm going to be critiquing some video from Karen Day and her horse Candy. Candy is a 20-year-old quarter horse who has had some issues, some hock and stifle arthritis, and some tripping and some other joint problems. And she's had injections and is on Previcox, I believe. So the first thing I want to say is I think this is the best thing you could possibly be doing for Candy. It's really great that you're doing it for her. She sounds like she's given her life to being a lesson horse and a trail horse, and now it's her turn to get some rehab. And I do think that, oh, she looks really good right there. I do think that that would be a good way to look at what you're doing for now, is to think of it as you're rehabilitating her because she's had so much damage done to her body. She's probably been running around upside down her whole life, which is why her joints have fallen apart. Because when a horse moves in with hollow movement, without using their top line, the percussion on the joints is so much harsher. When they're over their backs, they had more bounce and more bend in their joints, and it's a softer landing with every single stride, so their joints don't wear out. So I suspect that that's why her joints are in the condition that they're in. I'm certainly not a vet, but just hollow movement for 20 years will do that, because the percussion, the concussion is so hard on a horse's joints when they're hollow, and I'm sure she was hollow, because you are only now introducing this to her, and I'm really glad she found you. I think this work in hand looks really nice. I think that you're going in a very large circle, which is certainly going to be easier for her, especially because she has the hock issues. So I think that's a good thing, and she does look like she is stretching for you. So I can't unfortunately see close enough to see exactly what you're doing with your hands. I wish that I could see just a little bit closer. But I'm going to tell you how to do it, and then if you're doing that, then that's great. But you will want your palms facing up, both of your palms, the inside rein and the outside rein, and the whip will be in your hand with the outside rein, and that gives you a nice wrist movement for being able to touch her with that whip. So if you think of what you're doing right here, which does look really good by the way, as riding from the ground, your whip is your leg, and you've got the reins very similar to what they will be when you're riding her, and that's the way you want to think of it. You want to think of it like you're riding her. So right there, as you can see, every time she lowers her neck like that, her hocks begin to flex a little bit. Now she does look really stiff back there, very, as Will would say, stuck in fly paper in the back there, but that's because of what condition her joints are in. I think that doing what you're doing, just being patient as you're being, and giving her the chance to develop the top line so that this would become her natural way to move, is the best thing you could do, and you will begin to see more softening up of those joints back there and more flexion in her hocks. But it's just going to take time, Karen. It's just going to take a lot of time. And I've got Sky, and she's not quite that old, but it's a rehab thing, and it takes as long as it takes. And you think about what else would you be doing with her if you weren't doing this. So every day that you do this, you're helping her. And she could have another 10 years of active life of moving comfortably with this work. I mean, no guarantees, but she could have a new lease on life from what you're doing. So I think it's wonderful. Now, if I could see what you were doing more, I would maybe suggest occasionally getting a bit more lateral movement from her. And the reason for that is, and we can't do it too much with those hocks, so you'll have to kind of judge what she can do and what she can't do. But in theory, you want that inside hind leg to step under. There's a certain amount of stepping under her body with that inside hind, that naturally will lift up her back, and then the neck just lengthens like it's doing right there. So if you're not getting a stretch, then think of getting the inside hind to step under her just a little bit more. And that's really the beginning of a leg yield. If you want to do a leg yield on a long side of your ring, or you can use the leg yield movement in a large circle or a smaller circle as well. It's just stepping under with the inside hind. That's how you start any of that kind of movement. Now, the way you'll know if you're asking too much of her, if you're asking more than she can do, she's not going to be able to stretch, or she will lose her rhythm. You'll see a change in her movement if you're doing it just asking for too much. So in that case, you wouldn't make your leg yield quite as steep. You wouldn't make the angle as steep. Maybe you'd give her just a very, very, like from the quarter line over, and she's got the whole arena to do it. You know, that's a good way to start with a leg yield. But this looks really nice. She does look like she's pulling you a bit with her jaw. So, I mean, she's stretching, so that's good when she's doing that, but now she's not stretching. So, what you want to do, think about getting her to stay consistent in her stretch. That's your goal now, is now that she gets the idea sometimes she does stretch, you want her to stay in that position. So, when you see that she's starting to come up, you do something right then. You try to get your timing so that you're kind of quick to soften the jaw, or use your whip very gently to get her to step under before she's all the way up and inverted. So it's kind of a timing thing. If you as long as she's stretching, you take off the pressure. If the minute she starts to come out of the stretch, you begin to finesse with your inside rein in a give and take way. Maybe you see if she's actually stepping under. She could be bracing, but generally you want her to every step to be just a slight stepping under with that inside hind. So you switch directions, and here that's what I would be doing. Your position looks really good. You're walking right at her shoulder, which looks really great. You're standing up nice and straight. I think that you're doing a really good job here. One way to stop that kind of pushing, if she's pulling you and you feel like she's pulling you along with her neck or her jaw, you could lift the inside rein up into the corner of her mouth just a little bit as you soften her. Now, the inside rein is usually overused in work in hand. Really, the more important rein is the outside rein. That one you want to keep, and I can't quite see it, but you want to keep a consistent straight line weight of rein on the outside rein all the time. If her head comes up, you've got to move your rein so that it doesn't go slack for her and letting her escape the contact. But it also has to always be there for her to stretch down. Now that looks really nice. So the only thing I would do over here is, since she's kind of counterflexing out quite a bit, is I would maybe lift that inside rein, get your hand maybe a little closer to the bit, and give and take, soften that jaw. And if you pull the bit up into the corner of her mouth just a little bit as you're softening inward, it breaks up the bracing. Again, you don't want her to hang on that inside rein. Like if you start pulling with the inside rein to flex her inward, she's going to pull back, she's going to pull out, and you're going to pull in, and she's going to pull and you're going to pull, and she'd be happy probably to hang on that rein all the time. And what would happen is it's not going to soften her jaw, and it's also not going to teach her anything as far as self-carriage goes. That looks really good right there. But see, now you've got to keep that. She's only ever stretching for a couple steps. So what you want to do is be a little proactive. You see that she can do this. And she's doing it great. When she starts to come up, though, you think, I need to do something. I need to make that not quite as enjoyable for her as being down there in that stretch. So I'm either going to have her step under, like you're doing right now, or I'm going to soften her jaw. So that circle is naturally getting her inside hind under her body a little bit. So let's see what that does. And that certainly did do something, didn't it? But now she's kind of stiffening her jaw again. So that was a really great thing you just did. Maybe that's the way you want to do it. Just when she comes up, she's down in the stretch for like 2 or 3 strides, and then she starts to come up. You're going to either soften her jaw, get her to step under, because she's not really right there, and if those don't work, then you'll do that circle that you just did, because I think that was really effective. Try the other things first, because that looks really good. That circle seemed to really help her. I would try softening first and doing leg yields first, only because of what you've told me about her joints, because small circles are difficult for the joints. But I think that was a really good idea. I think what you need to do, though, is I think you're doing it great, and you just need to do more of it. In other words, don't spend half of the time her walking around not stretching. Do you know what I mean? Like, your goal now is, let's keep that consistent stretch. Your timing and being proactive to help her to stay just like that right there. Because you'll notice she only does it for a few steps. But hey, she's doing it. So I know that you were feeling like it's very, very slow going for you. But I'm telling you that looking at a 20-year-old horse with the issues you described, she looks really pretty good to me. And it does take time. But you've got her stretching. And that's what she needs. So really, the answer for her is right there. That. The more time she spends stepping under slightly and in a stretch, and I don't just mean her head down, I mean a stretch that lifts her back. The more time she spends like that, the more her top line muscles will develop, and you'll see that her underneck will atrophy a little and get floppier and not quite so pronounced. And this movement will get easier for her, and that's when I think that you'll see even more improvement in the stiffness, as you say you've already started to see. You are on the right track here, and I just think that you just need more of it. See, like all this time here, she's not stretching. What she's doing right here, and every time her head's about there, you can see she's pulling herself with her chest. That's how she knows to move. And pulling herself along with her chest, which is what she's been doing for 20 years, all that happens in the back is the hind legs just trail along behind her. And what you're trying to do is make the hind end, her haunches are the engine. So yes, you asked about activity. Yes, I think you do want more activity, because that gives you the push from behind. If you think of activity as it's like you've put your hand on her bottom and you're just pushing the energy through her back, over her back, and out the front. Everything just works better when she has some force of energy going forward. But you also say she gets really tense and it's really hard for her to come out of it. And I can relate to that as well. I have experienced that too. So for horses like this, many times you can't do anything more active than this right now. First, I mean, you can certainly try it, but if she tenses up, what good does activity do you? So you have to kind of cater this to her. As she gets stronger and able to be more in a consistent stretch, you will probably just find the activity is there. I mean, yes, you do have to ask for more activities sometimes, but she's just going to get more active as she can. You know, one thing Will told me a long time ago was that a horse should want to move. And the better she feels, the more she's going to want to move. So I wouldn't say activity is terrible here. I really wouldn't, considering what this girl's dealing with. But I think she looks great. Okay, so now you're lunging. Now, if you ever do another one of these, it'd be really great if you could get a little closer, because I'd love to see what is going on. Especially in the working hand, I'd love to see what your hands were actually doing. But I think your position was great, and I think you're getting there. You just need to be more proactive, and your goal is that she's not spending 60% of the time pulling with her chest, and then she stretches for 3 strides, and then she's back up again for 10 strides. Go for, she's down there, the minute she starts to come up, do something. Try finessing. Oh, there's a dog. try finessing the reins, getting her to step under more, and if all else fails, go into that circle. But don't be satisfied with that pulling with the chest. It would be better for you to do a shorter session and have every step be quality, because with the condition of her joints, you can't afford to have her going around hollow. I mean, she's not completely inverted, but she's pulling with her chest. So you don't want her to take, the goal is that she takes no steps that way. That's your goal. So I understand that that's going to take quite a bit of time, but that's the way you're thinking. You're thinking where you're headed and what your goals are so that you can keep progressing. So you're lunging her here, and you're going to the left here, and it looks to me, gosh, I can barely see that lunge line. I want to see if you've got a good contact on that line, because that is very important, because that's very important. What you're doing with the lunging, you're also riding from the ground. You're just farther away from her. So that you only have one rein, and that's why if you want it to feel more like an outside rein for her, you would go through the ring of the bit and over the pole and clip it to the outside rein. But either way, you want to have a steady, straight line. It looks like you do. It looks like you're doing a good job with that. Well, here she goes. You want a steady weight of rein in that contact at all times, and you want to keep her out there. So, well, she's a pretty girl, but that's not something you want to be doing too much of. I know she did that. That wasn't you. I know you're not asking her to canter. But I agree with you. We want to stay in the walk right now, and you said that's what you're doing, and I think you really do have a good grasp of this work. I'm wondering if you might want to consider lunging with side reins, because they will help her with her balance a little bit, and it's just good for most horses. The only horses that it isn't beneficial for is if they've been broken between the second and third vertebrae and they're doing a lot of curling, which she's not. So side reins might be a nice option, but definitely super long. You probably will have to augment them somehow. But the other thing you might want to try is a shambone. Look at her. She is stretching, though. She is stretching on the lunge line. I'm wondering if you could be closer to her so that you could kind of help her more. And you could still lunge her in the same way. I can't see the whip, so I can't see what you're doing with that. So it'd be really great to be up close, and I could tell you just exactly, give you some suggestions. The way to look at this lunging is watch the track that her forelegs are on and the track that her haunches are on. And in general, it looks like her inside hind leg is slightly closer to you than her front foreleg. And that's not terrible what she's doing right there, by the way. But if you could get those haunches out, even just to the point where they're on the same circle as the front, that would help her. That would be a very small amount of stepping under. So it's the same thing. We need her to step under herself with her inside hind. So eventually you will make that almost more like a shoulder in, so that the haunches are actually on a farther out circle. But I'm not sure if you asked for that trot or if she's just wanting to trot. If she is, I think you did say that. It would be easier for her at this point to do a too slow, hollow trot than it would be for her to walk actively over her back. That's completely understandable that she would choose that, because that would be easier. But we don't want her to do that. So a shambone is a good recommendation for her, because if you need any help with a shambone, you can just email me. But like right there, that is all just pulling with her chest, and she's just trailing along with the hind legs. That's not going to help her joints any. I'm sure you don't know that. I'm sure you know that, because I know you're staying in the walk mostly, but I'm just explaining to you the quality of this movement. Okay, there she goes. She's trying to go down. I think a shambone might be just what she needs, because it only activates if she comes up pretty high. then she just feels a little bit of pressure, as if the same way you put the bit up in the corner of her mouth, that's what the sham bone does. As soon as she drops her head again, it all goes away. So it's a really nice tool when you're teaching them to stretch, and I think you could use it at the walk as well on the lunge. Now, if you're using a sham bone or side reins, you wouldn't need to put the lunge line over her pole. You could just keep it on the inside bit because the sham bone or the side reins give you the outside rein that you are trying to achieve. So this walk here, I would try to keep her in the walk right now. It's pretty hard to keep a horse from trotting, but I would not ask for enough activity that it's as fast as she will walk in the stretch, but not go in the trot. Now, if she does go in the trot, it's not a big deal. But just don't do anything and let her come back down to the walk and work on that walk on the lunge. I like that you're walking with her in a concentric circle, because that lets her have a much bigger circle without you having to be too far away. I think maybe you could get even a little closer, but I do see the line, and it looks like you are doing a really good job keeping the straight weight of rein on the line. That's your only contact with her mouth, and that's really important, and it looks like you're really doing that well. So I would try to get a sham bone, and it only works, it's so loose that it's only active if she's really got her head up high, and see what that does. Or you could try super long side reins, but I think that would give her a little bit more help, because on the lunge you can't help her quite as much as you can in work in hand. So I would say, yeah, you look like you're doing really well. You look good. Your lunge line looks good. I can't see the whip, unfortunately, but you would use the whip as your leg. You use that to get her to step under herself the way you would if you were on her, and you also use it just right like on her bottom above her hocks. You would touch her there if you needed her to be activated. But again, there's a balance with her. If being more active makes it too hard for her to stretch, then that's too active for her, because it's really important that she be able to build those muscles and relax the underside of her body, and then we can start working on activity. You see here how her haunches are on the inside track and her forelegs are on a farther out track. So for now, I would think about getting a little closer and seeing if you can keep her haunches on the same track as her forelegs. That would be enough stepping under for now. And with side reins or a sham bone, you should be able to get a more consistent stretch. Just like I said in the work in hand, you're going for, she's at the walk only, but she's in a consistent stretch, so that when she does start to come up, you're right there. Okay, step under more, or whatever it is that you need to do, but you don't just let her pull herself with her chest for half the time. I understand this is probably really new that she's stretching at all, and I think she looks really good. I really think you can be proud of what you've done so far. For 20 years old with these issues that she has, and being a lesson horse, I mean, you can see she wants to stretch, but there's just the old go-to way that every step that she doesn't take using her underneck will erase that from her. And that's just, I've been there. You just do this for how long it takes. If it takes a year, it takes a year. If it takes 2 years, it takes 2 years. But when she's stretching consistently at the walk, then you can start trotting her, and you do it the very same thing until she's stretching consistently at the trot. If you've got a good saddle that you know fits her, and if you don't, we can talk about that. I can tell you if your saddle fits you or not, fits her or not, because she's got to be able to move in a saddle, or she's not going to stretch at all. Then the next step would be her stretching under saddle only in the walk. But if she's not doing that, it is pretty amazing how much more of a load the weight of a rider can be on a horse like this. So there's no rush on that, but you will get there. When she's stretching consistently at the walk, we can look at your saddle, and when you know that your saddle fits and it's not going to do her any damage or hinder her movement, then there's no reason why you can't start riding her at the walk, because it is sometimes easier to do the leg yields and the lateral movement that when she's under saddle. But you just have to be the judge of what's best for her. If she can't, wherever she's the most over her back, that's what you want to do. So I can see this trot again. I personally think I wouldn't trot her. See how her under neck is all activated and lit up there? That's what she's using right when she was just trotted by. Yes, I do see that she's trying to stretch at that trot. And I think that, you see how she's like she wants to? She needs help. She needs either side reins, a shambone, and a lot more top line development. So there's no rush on that trot. If she's spending more than half of her time pulling with her chest, you're not helping her joints by trotting her. You would do better, like I said about that concussion on the joints, you would do better to stay at the walk for now until she's really consistently stretching. I'm not saying she doesn't ever stretch at the trot, but I think that's what I would recommend to you. So that I think that's what I would recommend. I'd really stick to the walk if you can for now, and think of it like you're stepping up your game a little bit. You are going to want to go for that 100% of the time stretch. That'd be your goal. So as I said, if she's not stretching, catch it before she goes all into that hollow movement, and do something about it. Soften her jaw, get her to step under a little bit more, a small circle, something to get her back down there, and then take it all away when she's stretching, and before she gets all the way back up, you react so that she learns, it's just easier for me to just stay down here. Because we have to understand that this takes strength to walk like that. When I remember with Sky, for her to fully stretch in the very beginning of the rehab process, she had to completely stop walking. She could not do both. And then there was a time when she could take the slow as molasses step and keep her head down there. Now she books, and she has a fantastic walk that I'm getting ready to post over her back, and it still takes a lot of work. But I mean, it takes a very long time for these horses, but it's so worth it. And you will learn these skills from Candy. Candy will be an amazing teacher for you because it'll be easy with horses that don't have this issue. So I think you could be closer to her on the lunge. Look at that line. Looks like you've got really good contact. I really like the way you're walking in a concentric circle, standing up straight. I just can't see the whip, so I don't really know what you're doing with that. I'm sorry to say, and I couldn't see it in the work in hand either. But I think you're doing a really good job, and I think you're the best thing to ever happen to Candy, personally. So get that walk really good and really solid in the work in hand and on the lunge, and then under saddle, and then we can talk about the trot. But you can use the side reins and the shambone. I would suggest it at the walk on the lunge. So I hesitate to say don't trot her. I don't want to say that, but I can see that trot, you can see she's using the wrong muscles for most of the time. So don't do that to her joints is what I'm saying, until she can spend more time stretching at the trot. Does that make sense? And that will just happen for you when she can do it at the walk. Let her develop the strength. Get more picky about the walk and the quality of her walk right now. And I think you will see, as you've already said, you see that she's much less stiff now than before you started this work. I think you're going to see that continue, and I can't wait to see her progress. I think you're doing a fabulous job.